Okay, so I'm gonna be real. This video is gonna be a bit weird. This video was supposed to come out about 6 months ago, and it was actually supposed to be a collaboration video between me and Swag Kage. But Swag's been insanely busy, and honestly, I can't fault him for that at all, so it's just gonna be a Nick video today. But I did film half of the video like 6 months ago, and then Swag was gonna film his parts, and we're gonna put them together. Now I'm just gonna do Swag's parts, so you're just gonna get jump cuts between old Nick and new Nick, which is gonna be unsettling, and I apologize. Go enjoy the video now. As anime fans, we are obsessed with the concept of strength. Who's the strongest character? What's the strongest fighting move? And Naruto was absolutely no exception to this rule. To this day, people still argue about who the strongest Kage was, what the strongest ninjutsu is, taijutsu, genjutsu. People even argue about more minute things, like what the strongest Susanoo is. But today, I want to turn that on its head. Today, I don't want to talk about whose dad beats whose dad in a fight. Today, I want to talk about whose dad loses to whose dad in a fight. Today, I don't want to focus on strength. I want to focus on weakness. And while we've already done a couple of weakness videos, like who's the weakest Kage from each village, today, I want to talk about the weakest jutsus in Naruto. And for the first time in NC Hammer 23 history, I will not be talking alone, because today, I am being joined by the one and the only Swag Kage. Today, me and Swag Kage are on a mission to find the top 10 most useless jutsus in the entirety of Naruto. These are jutsus that are so weak we scratch our head as to why they were ever created. Jutsus that are called jutsus but just don't seem to be jutsus at all. And most importantly, jutsus that may be powerful but are so specifically nuanced that there's almost no situation in which to use them. Now, when you're talking about the most bottom level of jutsus, there's almost no way to say one is more powerful and or more useless than the other, because almost every single jutsu we're going to be talking about today has next to no use, specifically at the highest level of battle in the Naruto universe. So me and Swag are just going to take turns telling you all the jutsus you shouldn't commit any time to remembering or learning. Before we get into any of that, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to my page, and hit that noti bell, and while you're at it, do the same for Swag. And if you guys like the sound of my voice while I talk about anime, well, I have an entire another page talking about every anime that's not Naruto. We recently just posted our first ever One Piece video over there. I probably should mention its name. It's called The Weeb Commander. So jutsus, there's quite literally over 2,000 of them when you consider the anime, the manga, and light novels. And while the majority of jutsus are relatively useful, and a thin minority of jutsus are exponentially powerful, on the other end of that spectrum, we have jutsus that have next to no use. Jutsus that seemed as though they should have been throwaway jokes, but somehow made it into the actual show. And while there is a lot of these jutsus, me and Swag managed to whittle it down to a top 10. So with no further ado, let's get into this top 10 list, starting with the fastest character in the entirety of Naruto, being too fast for even the cameraman to keep up. Tentens, Twin Rising Dragon. To be fair to Tenten, after the time skip in Shippuden, this technique gets a bit more powerful. But we'll get to talking about the Shippuden form in a second here. For those of you who it's been a couple of years since you watched OG Naruto, you'll probably remember that Tenten didn't make the biggest impact on the Chunin exam, and this is largely due to the fact that her finisher, her ultimate move, was Twin Rising Dragons. Now let's crack into how Twin Rising Dragons works. Essentially, Tenten places 2 of her scrolls, which hold a multitude of her kunai and myriad of different weapons, on the ground, and then she does a couple of hand signs that release a smoke dragon that flies upwards, which also launches her scrolls in a helix type formation. Now, amongst the jutsus we're going to talk about today, this is arguably one of the cooler looking ones. Tenten is launched into the air in the middle of this double helix of unsealed weapons, and as these scrolls twist around her, Tenten has unlimited weapons that she can pull out of these scrolls by placing her hands on the seals, grabbing the weapons, and then throwing them. And on top of that, every single one of these weapons has a wire attached to it so she can pull it back for a second attack. So in essence, we're talking about a height advantage and borderline unlimited weapons, which is cool until you consider what universe we're in. Not only in part 1 of Naruto does Tenten have to individually put her hand on every single one of these seals to get a weapon and then throw it, this jutsu just leaves her floating in the air, incredibly wide open. Also, let's ponder for a fact, have you ever seen anybody in Naruto run out of shuriken or kunai? They all have a baseball-sized bag, which appears to be a black hole chest because they could reach in and pull out 47 kunai at once. The logistics of needing to launch yourself in the air and surround yourself with scrolls just so you can get a couple of things that apparently ninja can carry 300 of themselves on person is kind of stupid, especially when we consider the fact that it's her ultimate move. And mind you, it's still just kunai and shuriken and other throwable weapons with wires attached to them, to which Tamari quite literally just used wind release. There's a reason Tamari was able to give Tenten a free chiropractic appointment. It's because throwable weapons in the Naruto universe are meant to be the thing you throw at the beginning of a fight and then never use again. Quite literally, any type of release will negate weapons immediately. We've seen shuriken and kunai blocked by earth release, water release, fire release, wind release, maybe not lightning release, but like probably still lightning release. And to Tenten's credit, this move does get more powerful down the line. In Shippuden, Tenten's able to put 2 scrolls next to her, do the hand signs, make the smoke dragon, but now she doesn't have to touch each and every single one of the seals, which allows her to get her throwable weapons faster. And now, sometimes occasionally, she attaches an explosive tag to one of her weapons. Only problem is, you know, like still like a stiff breeze, and once again, you're getting your spine rearranged. But honestly, I feel as though I'd be lying if I told you that Twin Rising Dragon wasn't more useful than what Swag's about to talk to you about right now. Thanks, Past Nick, and you're absolutely right. What we're gonna talk about up next is way worse than Twin Rising Dragon, because at least Twin Rising Dragon has a possibility of killing you, but I'm not entirely sure this next jutsu does, because up next, we're talking about roof tile shuriken. Yeah, that's right, shurikens created out of roof tiles.
Oh, Nick, this jutsu sounds stupid. It's probably used by some filler character in some stupid arc, right?
Nope. By the third Hokage. Hiruzen, known as the Professor, one of the strongest people in Naruto's entire universe, is the creator of this jutsu. Well, we don't know if he's the creator of this jutsu because we know that Hiruzen knew every jutsu of the leaf, and therefore he could just know this one. So how exactly does the roof tile shuriken jutsu work in the first place? Well, this technique allows Hiruzen to remotely control, lift, levitate, and throw any tile in his area. Meaning, hypothetically, if Hiruzen doesn't have any kunai or ninja stars on him, he can just pressurize tiles around him and launch them at you, which isn't terrible. Like I just stated, he's able to apply chakra to any tiles that he levitates and throws at people, which makes these roof tiles substantially stronger than they would usually be. Otherwise, he kind of just be tossing clay pigeons at people. But how hard is he making these tiles? Probably about as hard as metal, which means he's just throwing ninja stars. However, these shuriken aren't really shuriken because shuriken are in the shape of a star for a reason. Stars are pointy. Tiles 90 degrees. So sure, are you getting some really hard squares tossed at you? Absolutely. But as to why Hiruzen, the man who knows thousands of very powerful jutsus, decided this was a jutsu he needed to use against Orochimaru, I don't think I'll ever know. I guess one of the added benefits of this technique is that he's able to control these tiles remotely, which means there's a possibility he could generate openings that he wouldn't be afforded with regular shuriken. But even that feels like a cope. And it's definitely something the fastest character in the universe, Tenten, wouldn't have to worry about. I'm just happy we could agree that Tenten's the fastest person in the universe. But sometimes you don't need speed. Sometimes true strength comes from sitting still, finding where home is. And there's nobody better at finding where home is than Yamato, because he kind of has the ability to take his home with him. What am I talking about? Obviously, the 4-pillar house technique. This technique allows Yamato to funnel his chakra into the ground, and by accelerating the growth rate of things like roots underground, sprout a house. And the thing is, it's stated that this house is built with the imagination of the user, meaning that Yamato is essentially able to create any house he wants, as long as he has a blueprint and imagination in his head while he's casting the jutsu. And if Yamato or any caster of this jutsu happens to have tags that they can place around the house, it essentially becomes a sealed off hiding place. Now, these tags are sealing tags that basically makes a barrier around the wooden house that makes all of the ninja's chakra signatures within the house undetectable, meaning that if you were a center type ninja or you had a Byakugan or something like that and you were looking for these ninjas that were using this technique and the seals in the forest, you wouldn't be able to find them. And while that's cool, I guess, I mean, it's the ability to quite literally make a house in a matter of seconds. That's awesome if you're a city planner. Because here's the thing, we have to separate the house from the seals. The house itself inherently does not stop detection of chakra, because that's what the seal tags do. If Yamato just made a wooden dome and slapped those seal tags on the wooden dome, it would be the same thing. But Yamato went a step further to literally architect an entire house made out of accelerated root growth. And like, do they leave these houses behind when they're done? Is there just perfectly functional 2-story houses popped up in the woods everywhere that Yamato's Yamato's ever had to camp. Also, let's not ignore the fact that Yamato himself has displayed that this jutsu is incredibly chakra depletive, especially when he uses would release serial pillar houses, which is essentially this technique, but Yamato makes like 6 houses in a row. But after using this technique one time, it depletes all of his chakra for a day. And while obviously this is super helpful after Konoha gets destroyed by pain, but like once again, that's city planning, not ninjutsu. But honestly, I can hardly be mad at the technique when you consider the fact that Yamato not only is able to make these houses, but somehow paint them and give them glass windows. So what do I know? That's why I have Swag here, because I know he knows something at least. I am sure he does know things past Nick, but he's not on this video. I actually know he knows a lot about this because this entry was his recommendation, because Jirobo is a personal favorite of both of ours. And if we're talking about Jirobo, you know we're gonna be talking about one of his most famous moves, shoulder charge. Now, technically, shoulder charge is a part of a greater overarching set of moves that Jirobo has that all fall under the classification of our hot fist. This is a taijutsu fighting style that focuses on Jirobo's immense size and strength that he's able to amplify using his curse seal, be it level 1 or level 2. However, all of the moves objectively dumb. See, every move in this taijutsu moveset has a name that Jirobo yells out every single time he uses it. And the one that me and Swag wanted to focus on is the good old shoulder charge, also known as thrusting shoulder, where Jirobo just yells out,
Thrusting shoulder.
and then he hits you with his shoulder. He's also got crumbling palm, where he yells out crumbling palm and then hits you with his palm. Or rising knee, where he yells out rising knee and then hits you with a rising knee. He's also got a move called rock attack, and you would think this is where he uses rocks, but nope, it's just him punching you. Well, obviously these moves, while wielded in the hands of Jirobo, are relatively powerful because Jirobo himself is big and strong. They are taijutsu moves that are just announcing what you're gonna do, and what you're gonna do isn't Lion's Barrage or Reverse Lotus, it's just a palm strike or a thrusted shoulder. My man is just announcing basic taijutsu moves. Imagine if every single time that Naruto was in a taijutsu battle, he announced every single punch he threw. You'd be furious. And now we're kicking it back to you, old Nick. And honestly, I wish I could say that was Jirobo's last entry on this list, but it's not. You know, for a guy who was almost able to beat Choji after he took the red pill, which makes Choji 100 times stronger than he was in base, you would figure Jirobo would stay off this list at least twice. But nope. Not only did this man name a shoulder charge a jutsu, he somehow made Earth-style Mud Wall significantly worse. Earth-Shore Return, or Earth-style Terror Shield as Jirobo calls it, is the biggest downgrade of a very fundamental jutsu I think we've ever seen. See, for Earth-Shore Return, Jirobo slams his hands into the ground and rips out a section of earth. By ripping out a rectangular section of earth, it operates as a wall or shield in front of him. But the thing about shields is that they usually come in different sizes. Jirobo's Earth-Shore Return is about maybe 1.5 times taller than him, just as wide as he is, and also maybe a foot thick. For all intents and purposes, it's the size of a door. And while the majority of people, including Jirobo, are smaller than a door, and thus this Earth-Shore Return is able to block things like kunai and other projectiles thrown at Jirobo, but this is a man who's able to use a technique by the names of Earth Mausoleum Dumpling, which basically has Jirobo plant his hands in the ground and rip out a small hill above his head and throw it at people. I'm not kidding, in the war arc, Jirobo was able to lift a mound of earth roughly the size of a baseball field above his head and throw it at Choji. So why on earth are we making an Earth-style mud wall essentially the size of a door? Not to mention, it also has to gingerly and slowly pop up on like a mud wall that quite literally just shoots out of the ground. We have seen Earth-style mud walls bisect battlefields. Kakashi's version was enough to stop the Deva Path of Pain. In fact, in Kakashi Retsudan, we learned that Kakashi, because he lost his Sharingan, worked on his Earth-style mud wall, where we learned that Kakashi's mud wall can now surround an entire small village, withstand a barrage of cannons, and even, in certain points, turn to quartz to negate the weakness to lightning. Oh, and he can keep the wall's integrity for a day. And it's not like Jirobo couldn't make massive earth constructs. His earth prison dome of magnificent nothingness, yes, that is the full name, was huge. It was so big it was able to hold multiple genin trying to use ninjutsu to break out of it captive. Also, his Earth Dome prison was able to regenerate while his Earth Shore return wasn't. Don't even get me started on how he can make Earth golems that can regenerate themselves. Like, why are we focusing on door-sized walls? All right, Swag, that's probably enough of us dunking on a character who shows up for 12 total episodes. Let's switch the topic of conversation to somebody more relevant, or for me to explain, because up next we have Frill-necked lizard. Now, this jutsu, much like roof tile shuriken, is not used by some irrelevant character. It's used by Obito, one of the strongest characters in the entire universe. Well, more specifically, it's used by Toby. You know, the substantially better version of Obito. You know, before he came all mopey and terrible to be around. Now, this ability technically did have a use. It was able to paralyze Kiba, Naruto, and Kakashi. As when Toby clasped his hand together and yelled out hidden jutsu, Frilled Neck Lizard, Kakashi told Naruto and Kiba to stay back. And for 10 or so seconds, they didn't move. It wasn't until Toby revealed to them that holding his hands up like this is everything that jutsu does, that they decided to move again. So while technically this jutsu does nothing, even though there is technically a hand sign associated with it, it's kind of the living embodiment of a bluff. And if you're powerful enough or seem dangerous enough like Toby did, that bluff can paralyze powerful opponents for a couple of seconds. And hypothetically, if Toby was working with somebody, they could have snuck behind them, as Kakashi, Naruto, and Kiba were trying to figure out what this jutsu did. But since you can't really pull that off twice, and the jutsu does technically do nothing except for pull in Obito's arms, yeah, it's completely useless. But it does speak to the power of a well played out bluff. I know I said we should go back to talking about relevant characters, but like, not a lot of relevant characters have irrelevant jutsus. That's why they're relevant characters. Which brings us squarely to decapitating airwaves. Do you guys remember the first time you saw Zaku, one of the genin from the Hidden Sound, use decapitating airwaves? It was terrifying. He was able to combine sound waves and airwaves in his arm tubes to essentially create incredibly strong wind release. And he was able to freely play with the mixture of airwaves and sound waves to get whatever desired effect he wanted. Let's say if hypothetically used the 100% airwaves and no sound waves, it was strong enough to shatter rocks. And in this confirmation of 100% airwaves, it essentially worked exactly like wind release. It could be used to shut down projectiles or cushion blows from a fall. And the true power of the technique came from the fact that he could use it in both hands, pointing it at different people or just at one person. But there was a problem with it. So obviously the way that these airwaves worked is that they were generated in Zaku's forearms and they were channeled down the tubes in his forearms and out of his palms. This is all based upon the reality that Zaku can generate energy within his elbows. And that's really cool. It's essentially wind release without having to use wind release. Except when you use wind release, you don't stand the chance of blowing your own elbows off your arm. What do I mean by that? Well, first let me tell you that the fight between Shino and Zaku was very different in the manga. Zaku, while he's trying to use his decapitating airwaves against Shino, runs into a little bit of an issue. That issue is as he tries to launch his decapitating airwaves, his elbows explode. And not just like explode and are bloody, his forearms and hands fall off. Mind you, this guy had just had his arms broken by Sasuke a couple of chapters back, so not a good streak to begin with. So why? What went catastrophically wrong that Zaku's entire forearms got blasted off his body? Shino put some bugs in his holes. Nothing more complicated than that. During their battle, Shino put a couple of bugs up in Zaku's air holes, and therefore when Zaku tried to use the decapitating air wave, the energy couldn't make it out of his hands and then blew back into his elbows and quite literally blew his arms off his body. But I know what you're saying,
well, Nick, nobody else could do that but Shino.
It's just inherently not true. Any user of earth release, water release, or anybody who was just able to slip a piece of metal into his little air hole would lead to him blowing his arms off his body. As long as you get enough stuff up those airwaves to block the sound from coming out, he's not wiping his own butt anymore. All of this preamble, all of this danger to accomplish wind release? No thanks. I'll take my chances learning the jutsu, because basic wind release is probably not only stronger than decapitating airwaves, but also carries a much lower risk. Unfortunately, that's the only entry on this list that really puts the user's life in danger. But that being stated, using this next jutsu could probably put your life in danger just for the sheer idiocracy of using it. Just now realizing that Swag, outside of our Lord and Savior Jirobos, gets to talk about like all the main characters of the show, and I'm just like, oh yeah, that one guy from 3 episodes and that filler arc that everybody forgets. Stupid jutsu. But then again, kind of my brand. But since we're talking about stupid characters from pseudo filler arcs, next up we have Cocoon. And if you're wondering,
Nick, What's Cocoon?
That's a really good question. Well, you know how some Jinchuriki get really cool abilities by being a Jinchuriki? If you're the Jinchuriki of Son Goku, you get lava release. If you're the Jinchuriki of Kokyo, you get steam release or boil release. If you're the Jinchuriki of Kurama, you can get a Jin cloak. Well, if you're the Jinchuriki of the Seven Tails Chome, you also get a couple of cool abilities. And I'm not talking about Fu's ability to partially transform and give herself wings on her hips that allow her to fly. No, I'm talking about her other ability. Cocoon. So what does Cocoon do? Is it a defensive measure? Sort of, yeah. Cocoon allows Chome and Fu to make a cocoon around themselves that slows down chakra absorption techniques. And that's it. Essentially, by creating this cocoon around themselves, Fu and Chome are able to slow down how fast somebody's able to absorb their chakra. Not prevent it or find a way out of their chakra being absorbed, slow it down. So all of your chakra and your tail beast won't be pulled out of you right now, just in like 25 minutes, which is cool, I guess, hypothetically, if you have backup on the way, or if the person pulling out your chakra has a date to get to in a half hour. All you've done is limit your mobility and slightly slow down how fast your life force is being pulled out of your body. But this cocoon must have impregnable defense, right? Well, it is made out of a mesh of superfine chakra threads, so it is certainly tough, but if you find the weak spot of the cocoon, preferably with a Byakugan or anything that allows you to see chakra density, you can simply stab it with a blade coated in chakra and enter the cocoon. So while this cocoon does operate as a somewhat halfway decent defense, if the person you're fighting is able to find the weak spot or just willing to try to look for the weak spot, because it's not like this cocoon is a mile wide, it's about the size of a human body, you can just stab a bunch of different places with a chakra blade and eventually you'll get in. It effectively does nothing. Like, yes, obviously being able to slow down how fast your chakra is being absorbed, or if your tail beast is pulling out of you, is nice in a world filled with people who are trying to pull a tail beast out of you, but only if you have backup, which is not what we're considering when we're talking about the usefulness of a jutsu. But the worst part is that this arc's dud jutsus doesn't end at Cocoon. And while usually I would let Swag jump in and do his final jutsu here, I think I'm gonna let him back cleanup, because the connection between Cocoon and the last entry on my list is too prominent to ignore. In the arc we're introduced to Cocoon, we're also introduced to another and arguably the most useless jutsu on the entirety of this list, Water Shuriken. Yes, you heard me right, a water release water shuriken jutsu. Now obviously the arc we're talking about happens in the early 400s of Naruto Shippuden. And in this arc we see Cocoon and water shuriken. We also see water shuriken used again in Gaara Hiden, but we're not going to talk about that right now. Water shuriken within the confines of Naruto Shippuden was used by a ninja by the name of Kigon. And while we only saw this jutsu for a couple of seconds, its appearance was so idiotic it left fans all across the globe perplexed. Kigon is a ninja trying to save Fu and Gaara, and as he's sweeping onto the scene, he uses this technique, water release water shuriken. And while we see him throw these shuriken, we never see them hit anybody, hit any barriers, or even really go anywhere. In fact, it appears as though the second they're thrown, they disappear, which makes sense when we consider what these shuriken are made of. These shuriken are made of water. And while obviously there are some incredibly strong water releases in Naruto, water dragon, water bullets, basically everything ever used by the Hidden Mist, these techniques focus on one of two possible things: extreme pressure and speed in the case of water bullets, or extreme amounts of water in the case of the water dragon. But with water shuriken, you have neither. These are shuriken made of water thrown at shuriken throwing speed. They're not turned into ice, they're not boiled, they're not made more dense. It is just water. And these water shuriken, if it hits something at the speed a shuriken is thrown, will just splash the person the shuriken is thrown at. Because while obviously water can kill a human in the Naruto universe and in real life, that takes, once again, either a massive amount of water or speed and pressure. If you're going to commit chakra to making water into shuriken, why not just throw shuriken? They're a metal. Water is a liquid. And not to mention that the prevailing theory about why we never see where these shuriken go is because the second that they're thrown, chakra is no longer applied to them. And therefore, after being thrown, they just lose form. Or because they are so small and this took place in the desert, after being thrown, they just evaporated. Honestly, this takes my highest spot for most useless jutsu we've seen in the entirety of Naruto. But since there is two of us on this video today, Swag also very much has a say on which is the most useless. I get both the says. And if we're being entirely real, I do believe the jutsu that we saved for last on the list here is by far and away the least useful jutsu we've ever seen. And not only is this jutsu completely insane and completely useless, it also was this ninja's kit in Ultimate Ninja Store. Like, having this jutsu in the anime and the manga is bad enough, but having this jutsu be one of your special moves in the Naruto fighting game, embarrassing. And that's because in dead last place, or I guess first place if you're talking about uselessness, we have summoning log roll. Yes, a full-on summoning jutsu dedicated to bringing a log to your location. A technique that Rin uses to not summon a toad or a snake or a hawk or even a weapon, a log. It's a bigger version of a substitution jutsu, just instead of using it to get away, you use it to attack. And do you throw this log at somebody? No. You roll it at them, and you hope that rolling log takes those ninjas' ankles out. To use this jutsu is to assume that somebody you're fighting against cannot react to a rolling log. Ninjas capable of shooting lightning, wind, water, fire out of all of their hands and mouths can't dodge a rolling log? Even if you summoned this log 3 inches from Naruto, he could dodge it. And you don't even have to use Naruto in this example. Any Jonin or Genin or Chunin worth their salt can dodge a log. Because in order to become a Genin, you have to pass tests. In order to become a Chunin, you have to make it through the forest of death. You're telling me you can't dodge a log slowly rolling at your ankles? What's most atrocious about this is that it's a summoning, and there is so much capability with a summoning. Where are these logs coming from? Is Rin just felling entire forests to make contracts with felled logs so she can roll them? Is it the same log over and over and over again? Did you just find a down log and she was like,
Gonna use that later.
it is literally a Fall Guys obstacle, and those rotund, short-legged little monsters can make it over it. How this was ever decided to be a ninjutsu baffles me. It's a disrespect to ninjutsu all across the world. It's even crazier when you think about the fact that Rin was paired up with Kakashi, Obito, and Minato. She was at one point the 3-tailed Jinchuriki, and her kit in Ultimate Storm 4 is using a log. No wonder Kakashi had to blow her back out. She wasn't getting away from Hidden Miss Shinobi, just rolling pieces of wood at him and hoping for the best. Her entire kit is basically Donkey Kong throwing barrels at Mario so he has to jump over them. Atrocious. An atrocious list filled with awful ninjutsu. Also a video constructed in a relatively awful way. But hopefully past Nick and future Nick are able to work together in a way that was slightly appealing. Take it away, past Nick. Tell him what to do. And that's it, guys. The top 10 most useless jutsus in Naruto. But what do you guys think? What deserves the top spot? Tell me in the comments below, and while you're down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And guys, you probably all follow him already, but if you guys don't follow Swag Kage already, pop on over to his page and drop a follow. He's been doing this a lot longer than me, and he's definitely one of my inspirations in this field. So Swag, thank you so much for coming on today's video, man. It was a pleasure getting to create with you. Fortunately for you, this isn't the last time you'll be seeing the Hammer Kage collaboration. We are also gonna be posting a top 10 strongest jutsus in all of Naruto over on Swag's page. So take this opportunity to go over there, drop a follow, and check out our newest video.